This is a briefing for elected officials and for the press. The schedule, which you should have in your packets if you picked up a packet, the agenda, is a full agenda, and it goes from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock. We will be having two panels, and the people on the dais will be asking questions of the panels. There will be several PowerPoint presentations, so simply want to let people know to look at the agenda if they want it, if we're interested in a particular thing. I'm State Senator Sheila Kuehl. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today for this briefing for elected officials and the Fourth Estate on the health risks associated with the Rocketdyne Santa Susana Field Labs rocket testing facility. As you know, the facility is quite near to here in the mountains, and in my nearly 13 years in the California legislature, first as Assembly member for the 41st District, and now as Senator for the 23rd Senate District, I have actually received more communications from my constituents regarding their concerns about the effects of the Rocketdyne site on their health than on any other single issue. As you can see from the materials in the briefing packet, there have been years and years of insufficient cleanup, resistance at every juncture by the Boeing company, dragging on and on, along with stonewalling and provision of only scanty information about the type and degree of toxic releases and illegal waste disposal activities at the site. So in my new position as the chair of the Senate Health Committee and as chair of the Select Committee on Radioactive and Chemical Contaminants and the health effects from them, I decided to invite a number of elected officials from the area, along with their staff, to hear from some of the experts and from community members regarding this matter. I want to call attention to the fact that your former Assembly member from the 41st District, Fran Pavley, is also here for the briefing, which I think is very appropriate as she may be involved in the future in some of these matters. I want to introduce Jennifer Richard from my office, my Sacramento office, who is my staff on SB 990, which is the bill that we will discuss later concerning a cleanup of this site.
So the levels of contamination at the Santa Susana Field Lab and ensuring the highest possible level of cleanup were the first and most serious environmental issues that I took on after being sworn into office in December. I am deeply concerned when I hear talk of this site possibly being released by the Boeing company for residential development, when the facts are still leaking out about the true nature and extent of toxic and radiological contamination. I am deeply concerned when Boeing has not been forthcoming following demands for relevant documents, and when there is inescapable and compelling evidence that far too many people who've lived near or worked at this site have gotten sick or died before their time.
It's an honor to have this hearing here in Calabasas, and I also just want to thank Senator Kuehl for your perseverance on this issue. Calabasas residents stand with you in demanding the highest standard of cleanup of this site for our neighbors. And I welcome the family members here also, and if there's anything we can do as a city to help you with this next phase of the cleanup, I'm looking forward to doing that.
I'm hopefully going to bring a little different perspective as opposed to a purely governmental one, although I, like our state senator, have had a lot of very personally saddening conversations with residents who have suffered from various forms of cancer over the years, and we always wonder, personally I spend almost every week hiking up there. My conditions got a little better, and I'm so getting closer to the area.
So this started to boil, the fuel melted, and this is the most interesting feature. And I had been looking at this chart for 25 years before we figured out the secret of the accident. This is the core cover gas. This was an area not of liquid sodium, but of simply a space where the gas was supposed to collect. And you'll see something called bellows. What we now know is that the radioactive gases released when the fuel melted boiled up into this little area where the gases were to collect and were intentionally pumped out of the core in the midst of the accident and then into the atmosphere. There was no containment structure. They couldn't contain the radioactive gas, so they intentionally pumped it out.
I should say that risk analysis or even the exposure work that we have done were not associated with scenarios of residents being at the site, because that was not the purview of our study. We were asked specifically about the impact of the facility on the surrounding community.
My neighborhood was built and occupied in 1959, the same year as the sodium reactor experiment failure. In 1995, I was diagnosed with a late-stage solid tumor of the bladder. My doctors asked me where I worked, and when they found out that it was at the nuclear test facility, they concluded that my former job was the cause of my cancer.
My big, strong dad, whom I only saw cry once in my life, was reduced to a very frail and emotional man. During his last few weeks on Earth, he was very concerned about getting out the truth about what he had seen and done during his years at Rocketdyne. He told my mom, "Don't let him get away with it." Growing up, I rarely heard my dad discuss his job. Occasionally, he would talk about it, but never in a bad way. Even when his fellow firemen friends began dying from different forms of cancer, he never badmouthed his employer. He always remained loyal. Even when they outsourced the firemen in the late 80s, after most had died from cancer anyways, he still remained loyal. He was so loyal that instead of taking the layoff, he continued to work on the Hill for another company called Pinkerton, and then it was later Omniplex. He worked right up until his diagnosis of brain cancer. My dad was so well respected among his colleagues that for the first time ever at the Santa Susana facility, they allowed workers to throw a barbecue fundraiser memorial in honor of my dad. Upon my dad's diagnosis, it became quite apparent that his death was imminent. My dad became angry because he now knew that, like his fellow fireman friends, he was not going to be one of the lucky ones and escape the fate that Rocketdyne had bestowed on so many. He quickly began telling of how they would be told to dispose of barrels of chemicals by dumping them in a burn pit and then shooting them with a gun. He also talked about how buildings were so contaminated that they were knocked down and demolished and then rebuilt over the site.
Barbara received a call from a group in the San Fernando Valley who were meeting. It was a group of enlightened veterans, professors, doctors, lawyers, artists, mothers. They were seasoned players in the fight for justice against the world of nuclear and chemical pollution. And with them, we formed the Rocketdyne Cleanup Coalition, and through them we met Dan Hirsch and Committee to Bridge the Gap. We were new to this world. We were gullible and we desperately wanted to trust. But the more we learned, the worse things became. And we learned that there was nobody we could trust.
The gene mutates at conception, so these children are born with 9 months of cancer growth. So whatever that the mother is exposed to just prior to conception or in early development is a factor. This is my daughter Trinity. The picture on the left is her the day before her diagnosis. She was a little pink princess at Halloween, and November 1st, I took her to the doctor. I started having strabismus, which means a lazy eye, and she started intermittently vomiting and having severe eye pain, which I thought was ear infection. And of course the doctor said, "Wait, clear ear, she's fine, don't worry about it, you're looking for the quick fix and the antibiotic." Well, a few days later she was diagnosed and sent to Children's Hospital.
Yeah, I just want to thank you also for your personal testimonies, and it reminds me of a conversation I had in 1991 in Kiev, Ukraine. I was there doing work for the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, and one evening one of the Ukrainian women invited our group over for dinner. We had a long conversation, and one of the things that came out in that conversation was that the political empowerment that brought the Soviet Union down, I mean, I'm overstating the case here, but part of the political empowerment with these women that were in this room arose after Chernobyl, and I'll never forget the intensity of the look on her face as she said, when your kids start dying of cancer, There is no KGB, no Red Army, no nothing that's going to stop.
Hell hath no
Stan
fury.
the woman and protecting her child.
Yes.
And that this one individual made the point that she felt that the Chernobyl accident had more to do with the destabilizing in the Soviet Union, at least at the Ukrainian portion of it, than any other single event, and because it empowered mothers all over that Kiev, Chernobyl area.
So one of the reasons for this briefing is I want to put it on my website. I want to build a greater understanding of the history, of the science, of the health risks. So this year, I've got another bill, SB 990, which mandates a Superfund level cleanup of the site before it can be turned into residential property.